Welcome back to Live from Paris here on France 24. I'm Mark Owen. These are the headlines. The scandal over migrant children mistreated at the border detention centres. The chief of the agency has resigned. But there are still children in a centre singled out over disgraceful treatment of youngsters. Palestinians boycott and condemn Trump's Middle East peace plan. His son-in-law launches it nonetheless in Bahrain. And at the same time, there are protests against it in the Gaza Strip and the West Bank. Iran says it will further free itself from the 2015 nuclear deal in defiance of new American sanctions. This comes as US President Trump warns Iran of overwhelming retaliation for any attacks. Thank you very much for being with us. The US Customs and Border Enforcement Chief has quit amid the scandal over the mistreatment of migrant children along the US border with Mexico. The latest on the children held at Clint in Texas. Most of the, at the peak, 350 were there. They've been moved out, but then a report saying some 100 have been taken back. At the centre, conditions shocked and sickened observers.
Recent reports about the child detention centre in Clint, Texas have drawn the spotlight back to the appalling conditions faced by many migrant children on the US-Mexico border. Children at the facility were forced to sleep on the floor for weeks without food and while battling flu and lice infestations, according to lawyers. After being removed from the site by authorities, the whereabouts of the children is currently unknown. Since the Clint case, House Democrats have been pushing to get a humanitarian border bill through Congress.
Children, the children, the children. It's about lifting them up in a way that takes them beyond what we do today.
The House is expected to vote on a $4.5 billion package of humanitarian aid for migrants at the southern border. The legislation also seeks to improve standards at border detention centres and to reinstate aid to Central American countries cut off by US President Donald Trump. But the bill will face a tough time getting through. Trump has threatened to veto the legislation if the money is barred from use on border control. Mass deportation raids promised by the president have been suspended for 2 weeks while Congress seeks a compromise. The proposed bill would also have to pass through the Republican-controlled Senate. From the beginning of the year up until June the 1st, US border control has arrested more than 60,000 unaccompanied children. At least 7 migrant children have died in US custody since late 2018.
Well, one person who saw those facilities firsthand is Warren Binford, law professor at Willamette University. Eyewitness to those conditions that children have been kept in. She joined us a few moments ago.
This is a Border Patrol facility that is intended for 104 adult males with holding cells, open toilets, things like that. So when we arrived and we discovered that there were 350 children, more than 350 children being there, we were quite shocked. And when we looked at the roster of children who were there, it included children of all ages from 0 to 17, including some child mothers who were trying to take care of their infants. In addition to that, we found that the toddlers and preschoolers didn't have anyone there taking care of them, such that the older children, some of who were as young as 7 years old, were trying to take care of the toddlers and the preschoolers. In addition to that, one of the child mothers, her infant got sick, and because there was no one to care for the sick children, she ended up having to go into the quarantine area to care for her infant, and she too developed this severe influenza that's affected approximately 15 children there. And she then became sick with influenza, could not take care of her infant, so her infant was then given to another child to take care of. So basically what's happening is you have children who are sick, you have children that are in cells where there are as many as 100 children in these cells. One boy described that when he first got there were 300 children in the cells. Many of these children are being housed in what is literally a metal warehouse with no windows. And it is the worst circumstances that I've ever seen children being kept in the United States of America. And I'm sickened by it. It's just
indeed, and let's
heartbreaking.
Let's underline this is happening in the United States, the land of the free, the leader of the free world, as we always say. These children lack the basics. Could you spell out what that means? The basics that they've been lacking. Obviously, you've detailed harrowing things about sickness, but tell us about the basics that they've not been getting.
Yeah, so basically, these children have not been getting regular showers. They've not been able to brush their teeth on a regular basis. They've not been given healthy food on a regular basis. They are being given instant foods and frozen foods all day, every day. That 3 times a day, they are given Kool-Aid, which is a highly chemical sugar punch, and a cookie. And then in the morning, they're given instant oatmeal. At lunch, they're given instant soup. And for dinner, they're given a frozen burrito in addition to the cookie and the Kool-Aid. And they are hungry. They are feeding the babies this. They are feeding the child mothers this. They're feeding the sick children this. There's no variation in this diet. In addition to that, the children are given open toilets in the cell for the ones who are in the main facility. And there is no privacy. These toilets are out in the open, and they have no soap in the cells, so that they are literally urinating, defecating, eating, and sleeping in cells that are overcrowded. And they have no way to even keep their hands clean, because the government is not providing soap to these children at any time other than the showers, which are infrequent and very short in duration.
Can't even wash their hands, can't even brush their teeth.
The children don't have enough places to sleep.
Absolutely.
No, and they're sleeping
shocking.
on the floor. There are, yeah, there are. And that we've heard of, the children have reported of infants sleeping on the concrete floor, sleeping on cement blocks. They've described toddlers and preschoolers sleeping on the concrete floors. It really is a dystopian nightmare for these children. And it's hard to believe that this is happening in the United States of America. It would be hard to believe that this is happening anywhere in the world, but for a country that is as wealthy and purports to be as committed to its children as the United States, it's hard for me to reconcile. It's
what you're telling us is absolutely heartbreaking from a human perspective. It's hard to think that this could even be legal. That's another argument, of course. How did the border officers explain this situation to you?
Well, what they've explained, and this part is absolutely true, is that they are not set up for these children, that the children are not allowed to be in these facilities for more than a few hours. So basically what happens is a child comes across the border, is being separated from their family, being reclassified as an unaccompanied minor, and then the Border Patrol takes the child to a Border Patrol facility where the Office of Refugee Resettlement is supposed to pick up that child and within a few days reunite the child with their families. They're not supposed to be in these Border Patrol facilities, which are notoriously horrendous, for any significant period of time. But what has happened is that ORR has been so fundamentally mismanaged over the last couple of years that they are not picking up these children and providing them with the beds and the reunification services that are required under the law.
Warren Binford, who saw the Texas border facility where 350 children, as you said, were being kept, ages ranging from babies to 17-year-olds, all in appalling conditions, without any of the basics that one would expect, let alone what one would want to give to children being held in those difficult circumstances. We will watch all developments on this story, the child migrants and how they've been mistreated in the US. The first phase of the US President Donald Trump's Middle East peace plan has been officially launched in Bahrain. Representing Trump at the workshop in Bahrain, his son-in-law, Jared Kushner. Kushner said agreement on economic pathway is a precondition for Middle East peace.
For a moment, imagine a new reality in the Middle East. Imagine a bustling commercial and tourist center in Gaza and the West Bank where international businesses come together and thrive. Imagine the West Bank as a blossoming economy full of entrepreneurs, engineers, scientists, and business leaders. Imagine people and goods flowing quickly and securely throughout the region as economics become more integrated and people become more prosperous.
Jared Kushner there representing Donald Trump in Bahrain. Let's bring in David Smith, bureau chief of the Guardian newspaper in Washington, D.C., for some analysis on this story. David, as ever, welcome to the program. Always a pleasure to have you with us. Given there are so many notable absentees, including some very key ones from this workshop, as they're calling it, what does the US hope to gain from it?
That's a good question, because there is indeed a lot of skepticism. I think what is the US trying to gain? It's a very Donald Trump approach here. It's certainly thinking big, as you heard Jared Kushner talked there, $50 billion over 10 years. It's saying, imagine a new Middle East and Palestinian territory. The philosophy seems to be, for many years, in terms of the carrot and stick approach, a stick has always been tried and has always failed. So let's try a very attractive carrot this time. And Jared Kushner also went out of his way to say that the US and Donald Trump have not given up on the Palestinian people, at least. So I think in typical Donald Trump terms, there's an attempt here to make a grand gesture, to be seen as disrupting the old way of doing things with a shiny presentation. But given those absences of both the Palestinian and Israeli leadership and some other notables in Bahrain, certainly there's the critics' case and the Palestinians' case is that they do have it back to front, and you need to sort out the political process before you can talk economics.
Indeed, the Palestinians condemning it as a purely economic plan doomed to failure. Of course, the other side saying $50 billion as a kind of way of boosting the economy in the Palestinian territories. And of course, it is a chicken and egg scenario, as you pointed out, David. What about the rest of the plan? This is just the opening gambit, if you like. Do we have any inclination, any clues as to what might be coming next?
Not a lot, and that is one of the main objections, that it does seem, at least so far, very focused on the economics and the development. And again, as we know, when Donald Trump talks about North Korea, he points out the potential of the coast for hotel developments and so on. But skeptics feel this is dead in the water until you really grapple with the political side. And they're very worried about what Trump will come up with there, because for the past 2.5 years, all the indications have been that he's very favorable towards Israel and Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu in particular. And we saw the recognition of Jerusalem as the capital of Israel and the move of the US embassy there. We've seen Palestinian diplomatic office closed and a cut in funding. So those are grim omens, really, for what will come politically. And further complicating matters, Saudi Arabia has come out and said it still favors a two-state solution, which, despite the Saudis' close alliance with Jared Kushner, again, seems to go against what the White House is likely to push for.
That is a very interesting revelation at the end there, David. But everything you said is always interesting, sir. David Smith of The Guardian there, joining us for that analysis. Thank you, sir, very much indeed. The Bahrain conference, as we were talking about there with David, or the workshop for peace and prosperity, to give it its full billing, was boycotted, as we were saying, by the Palestinians. And as it was taking place, these were the scenes in the Palestinian territories. Large demonstrations, both in the Gaza Strip and the West Bank. The Palestinians say that the Trump plan, which is touting $50 billion in investment, is an economy-first approach doomed to fail.
We don't need money. We're not hungry for bread. We're hungry for dignity. Give us our dignity and freedom, not money.
We're here also to send a message that we will not be deceived by the so-called economic plan. There can be no economic solution as a substitute to our freedom. And second, how can we have economic development when we cannot control our borders, our import, our export, our free market, our freedom of movement? And even we do not control the taxes we pay, which Israel keeps cutting from time to time. So there is no economic prosperity. It's a deceit that Mr. Kushner is spreading around, and we will not be deceived by it.
Indeed, the point of view eloquently expressed of Palestinians as Donald Trump launches the first part of his Middle East peace plan. Next, Iran says it will further free itself from the 2015 nuclear deal in defiance of new American sanctions. This comes as US President Trump warns Iran of overwhelming retaliation for any attacks. All this, of course, coming in the wake of the shooting down of a US surveillance drone by the Iranians and an attack on 2 oil tankers in the Strait of Hormuz.
After Iran's president slammed new U.S. sanctions as outrageous and idiotic, a top security official announced that next month the country plans to abandon further commitments under the landmark nuclear deal of 2015. Iran has already begun ramping up uranium enrichment and is on track to break one of the pact's key limits on Thursday. A course of action that drew criticism from France's foreign minister.
A violation from Iran would be a serious mistake and a bad response to the pressure exerted by the United States. French, German, and British diplomacy is fully mobilized to make Iran understand that this would not be in its interest.
Est entièrement mobilisé pour faire comprendre à l'Iran que ce ne serait pas son intérêt.
Meanwhile, Donald Trump fired off a saber-rattling tweet in response to Tehran's criticism.
Iran's very ignorant and insulting statement put out today only shows that they do not understand reality. Any attack by Iran on anything American will be met with great and overwhelming force. In some areas, overwhelming will mean obliteration.
Britain's foreign secretary also urged restraint.
Neither side wants war in this situation, but it's very important that there are ladders for people to climb down so that discussions and negotiations can take place.
Tensions between the U.S. and Iran have been at a fever pitch since last week. Washington accuses Iran of shooting down one of its drones over international waters. Tehran maintains the drone was flying over its own airspace.
France is currently baking in a heat wave. Climate experts, though, are warning the French that they need to get used to it. And government officials are also warning that conditions this year could be worse than the heat wave of 2003. 2003 was when 19,000 people across France died due to the excessive heat. Temperatures then set to hit 40 degrees Celsius this week. Everyone is trying to find a good way to cool off.
Sunbathing is out and foot baths are in. In this Paris nursing home, people are doing whatever it takes to beat the heat.
I need to drink. I have trouble breathing.
Staff have been working overtime since Sunday. The patio needs to be hosed down to keep temperatures cool. The south-facing windows have been whited out with chalk to block the sun. Salads and other cold dishes are at the top of the menu. The most at-risk residents here are also benefiting from cutting-edge technology. Connected cups that allow staff to monitor whether seniors are staying hydrated. Staff advise residents to drink at least 7 glasses of water a day.
After an hour, if the person isn't drinking enough, there's a blue stripe that lights up. It complements the work of the healthcare aides.
An additional staff member was hired for the week with a single mission: helping elderly residents stay hydrated. In Tourcoing, northern France, home health aides are also on alert. They must help prevent patients' illnesses from getting worse, despite the high temperatures.
I wear light clothes, close the curtains, and use the fan. That's about it.
This nurse will visit 15 more patients today. She's often the only person they'll see the entire day.